Hello, my friends. How are we doing? Welcome to another episode of 30 Albums for 30 Years, 1964 through 1994, where we take a look and a listen to the most impactful albums per year between those years. So it's 30 albums for each one of those years. Hopefully we get to 900 albums. We'll see how it goes. I am your host, Jay Sweet. Before we get started, I want to welcome our new listeners in Albania. Albania joining now 21 countries that are listening to 30 albums for 30 years. So welcome. Nice to have you aboard. In today's episode, we will be checking out the album Wayne Shorter, Night Dreamer, Blue Note Records, released November of 1964, recorded April 19th of 1964. Joining me for this episode is Bruce Williams. Bruce is a fantastic jazz saxophonist who has worked with many legends, including Little Jimmy Scott and Frank Foster. He played with the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra, World Saxophone Quartet, Stanley Cowell, Roy Hargrove, Curtis Fuller, just to name a few. He's also a noted jazz educator and a mentor towards or for young jazz musicians. So he has served as an adjunct sax teacher at schools like the New School, Princeton, Bard College, and is currently an ensemble coach for the jazz department at Juilliard. So it's going to be a good show. Let's get into it. Wayne Shorter's Night Dreamer. All right, so saxophone legend Wayne Shorter has had an incredible career and easily ranks among the most impactful jazz musicians of the second half of the 20th century. While most musicians are lucky to be associated with one classic group, Wayne Shorter was part of three: Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers, 1959 through 1963, Miles Davis's Second Great Quintet, 1964 through 1970, and Weather Report, 1971 through 1986. Outside of these groups, Shorter has been celebrated for his solo works like Night Dreamer and his compositions. Wayne Shorter began his life and musical journey in Newark, New Jersey. Shout out to New Jersey. Encouraged by his father, Shorter attended Newark Arts High School and earned a music education degree from New York University in 1956. After college, he spent 2 years in the Army. Upon his return, he began playing with trumpeter and bandleader Maynard Ferguson. In 1959, he became a member and eventually the musical director of Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers. Now, Shorter offered many original compositions for the group and continued Blakey's tradition of providing hard bop jazz presentations that blended bebop elements with other African American musical forms like gospel, blues, soul, and swing. In 1964, Wayne Shorter hooked up with Miles Davis, who assembled a supergroup of younger jazz musicians for his Second Great Quintet. That's, of course, Herbie Hancock on piano, Ron Carter on bass, Tony Williams on drums, and Wayne Shorter. So Shorter was writing much of the material, and the group was now presenting a more exploratory style of jazz that offered modernistic melodies along with a looser and more interactive rhythmic concept. Around the time he joined Miles Davis, Wayne Shorter began recording solo albums for Blue Note Records. The first of these releases was Night Dreamer, today's album. The record featured a fantastic group of musicians that were all associated with John Coltrane. This includes Lee Morgan on trumpet, McCoy Tyner on piano, Reggie Workman on bass, and Elvin Jones on drums. Although not released during the year, Shorter also recorded the albums JuJu, which would be released in 1965, and Speak No Evil, 1966. Beginning in 1971, Wayne Shorter hooked up with pianist Joe Zawinul, and they formed the electric jazz fusion supergroup Weather Report, while continuing various solo and sideman projects as well. Once Weather Report folded in 1986, Wayne Shorter continued to present more notable projects. In 2018, Shorter retired from performing after nearly 7 years, but continued to compose. Throughout his career, he has won 11 Grammy Awards, including a Lifetime Achievement honor. Sadly, Wayne Shorter died around the time I began doing this podcast March 2nd, 2023. He was 89 years old and left a great deal of incredible and inspired music. All right, so as I mentioned, I discussed the music and career of Wayne Shorter with Bruce Williams, saxophonist Bruce Williams. So this was part of our conversation from an earlier interview. I hope you enjoy it. Here's Bruce Williams talking about Wayne Shorter. How you been, man? It's been a while.
Good.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
You too.
Let's talk a little Wayne Shorter.
Sure.
And, I guess first off, just give me your overall impressions of his playing.
I love Wayne. I think Wayne is one of the greatest painters in art. Like he's so poetic and he paints and so emotional, but so intellectual.
Mhm.
You know, even on something as simple as the blues, he can make it sound so complex. And his compositional style. You can hear that he's influenced by Train, but he's not. It's like he's kind of his own man.
Right.
He's one of my favorite players and composers in the music. Some people would say favorite composer, but I like him as a player too. There's so much that I've drawn from listening to Wayne over the years for my playing. You know, I like the openness. I like the soul and the spirit, but I like the intellect compositionally. I like how he organizes things. He organizes things in a way that doesn't sound like they're organized, but they're very organized. You know, it doesn't sound like school. It really sounds like that's just how he is.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a great appreciation for that.
Yeah.
I also feel like as a saxophone player, at times he can be overlooked for as judging one's virtuosity versus the next, which I learned very early on that technique is personal. So long as you can play what you want to play to express yourself, you have technique.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's fundamental things in technique that we all want to do, like at certain tempos, you want to have certain scales and arpeggios and a good tone and things like that. But after that, now it starts to become art. Are we judging based on collegiate Western standards? Or are we going to be judging based on the art and how it affects people? Because I've never heard a jazz listener complain about Wayne's technique or say this. I've never heard a real jazz. I've only heard students.
Huh.
You know,
See, not being a saxophone player, I've never heard that perception that maybe he wasn't as technically gifted, perhaps.
Yeah, people would like to say that. They would put Train, they would put Dexter, they would put Stan Getz, they would put all these other, Johnny Griffin. They all had chops. On first glance, yes, they had maybe more chops, but that's not the point.
Right.
The point is what he did with what he had. You know.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you do hear, I think, musicians who are also great composers like Wayne Shorter, it's almost like one and the same. I feel like, especially when he's playing his tunes, his compositional style filters into his improvisations.
Oh yeah.
You know.
What's that recording he put out? Man, it's one of my favorite ones from the 90s. And he's got Children of the Night on there and everything. It's got like half synthesizer instruments, the rest regular instruments blended in.
What is he playing a lot of soprano?
A lot of soprano, but he's playing all the saxophones too. It's a great record, but then there's a video online him playing the same songs in like a quartet or quintet setting. He's playing all the parts. It's like he's thinking about it as an orchestration.
Mm.
So parts that get moved around, he's playing those parts on saxophone as well as the rhythm section. And someone will call it fusion or whatever. I just hear it as music. I mean, Wayne, to me, much like someone like Archie Shepp or Oliver Lake or, any of those, it's just sound. It's just music, to have so many labels and boundaries. He just played sound to me, you know. Especially when you got towards the supposed fusion and modern era.
Right.
It just became a texture that he was playing off a different texture to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty remarkable. I mean, well, did you ever meet? Did you know him?
I didn't know him, but I did meet him. One day I was driving around and I realized he was on a live interview on WBGO.
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty deep downtown Newark. I just hit a hard U. Illegal as can be.
Not easy in Newark to do that.
And I drove down to BGO, parked and ran in, listening to his interview, ran in and said, I just had to come meet you. And he was kind of shocked. And I told him I was a saxophone player. We spoke a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't deep, but I just had to see the man. I just had to touch him. I just had to,
right.
You know, it's like, how was I not going to do that? You know what I mean? How was I not going to do that? You know, I was like, this cat that I love just playing so much. I mean, even for the fact that like Wayne playing with like Freddie,
mm-hmm.
and you know, having people like James Spalding, because James Spalding is another influence that people kind of overlook, like how they utilize James Spalding. I was like, I had to see one of these people that was that smart,
mm-hmm.
that deep to understand everybody's role. I mean, for me to run into Wayne and to talk to him, just to see him, would have been the same as if someone said, "Go meet Duke Ellington."
Right.
To me, it's the same thing. It's like people who think with that kind of organizational mind and they're so fluid. I just would love to be around them. That was one of the reasons why I really love Stanley Cowell. That kind of mind, it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, Wayne Shorter, when you hear his interviews and stuff, he just thinks differently than everybody else. You know,
Everybody, yeah.
He's on a different plane. It's crazy. It was on a different plane. Yeah. So the album we're going to be discussing in this episode is Night Dreamer, 1964.
The Virgo Oriental folk sound.
Yeah, Armageddon.
Armageddon.
Black Mountain. Yeah, you
Black
know.
Now.
Pretty magical year for him. I mean, he recorded, JuJu that year. Speak No Evil. They didn't come out that year, but recorded them. Anything about his style? I mean, I feel like Wayne Shorter, no matter what genre he was playing with, whether it's Weather Report or Blakey, he was always Wayne Shorter. But pretty magical year for him being in Miles's band. Or I think he probably recorded this a little before Miles's band, maybe around the same time. But
right.
What about his playing in that particular era?
Soulful. I mean, intense and soulful, and you can hear the cry in his sound. You always could hear it, but you could hear it there. And I just find him to be a driving force at that time. And I like the contrast between other players during that era, because there's so much color in this playing. It's not just the blues, which I think the blues is very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so many, like, architecturally musical shapes that he presents. And he's always presenting them. It's just super unique. There's other songs of his that I'll play from time to time, like I'll play Anna Maria, and I recorded a recording a few months back, and it's like right after he passed. I recorded Toy Tune, and it's like just the way he writes has influenced me so much. He's so crafty, just so crafty. But once again, it doesn't sound heady, but there's a lot of intellect involved. It's intellectual, but it's extremely accessible to the listener.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, when you look at the way he handled harmony in his tunes, and just even he would write forms, maybe instead of doing a 24 bar structure, it'd be 20 bars, 28 bars.
Right.
yeah, there was just a uniqueness in it, but yet you almost have to do a double take if you're not looking at the chart and you go, that doesn't sound out of the ordinary necessarily. It just sounds like great music.
Yeah, and you can look at some of his charts or the charts that they have of the songs, and you would think it would not really make sense harmonically. But
Right.
you sit down and you play it, and you're like, it makes total sense.
Yeah,
It makes total sense.
yeah, I agree. And it's like sometimes even there's a tune on that record, Charcoal Blues, and I'm
Hmm.
listening to it. I'm like, it took me a while to go, yeah, it's a blues, but it's so it's so well hidden that it's. I mean, not maybe he's not trying to hide it, but it's a blues, but not as a blues like you would maybe think. I mean, if it wasn't called Charcoal Blues, I would probably not even realize right away that it's 12-bar structure. Like it's just the way he handles his phrasing and his melody. It's amazing.
It's like I think we both heard this so many times coming up trying to play. Oh man, it's just the blues.
Yeah.
And like when you really look deeper, it is just the blues. But I was on another kind of interview recently with a trumpet player, Gibton Jellin from the Bahamas. He's doing his thing called In the Shed, and we were talking about the blues and how important it is to play the blues, not a blues. And Wayne plays the blues on a blues all the time. It doesn't have to sound like what we would typically in Western music call a blues scale.
Right.
It just has a cry and a feeling about it that I think is present in the music. You know, I've had the good fortune of knowing a few people that know Wayne, that were from Newark.
Yeah.
The Phipps family, you know, and I've known several Phipps that would tell me Wayne's stories and how he started and how he was as a person.
Mhm.
And I've had people I've met that spent time with him talking to him. They all say that he basically speaks the way he plays.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
nice.
it's not such a far stretch, you know. So from a night dreamer to a Virgo to Oriental folk song,
Mm.
I mean, for a guy during that period to be thinking about Oriental folk song, to think about a title like that,
Yeah.
he must have been checking out so many other things other than the average Joe.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's I mean, I think him and Train used to get together a lot and listen to all kinds of, for lack of a better term, world music.
Yeah,
You know, and you could hear it like you mentioned earlier. I think it was a good point. There is the Train influence around this time, but he's not trying to be Train. I mean, of course, this record he's got Reggie Workman, Elvin Jones. People are so McCoy Tyner. People are associated with Train, so there's that connection. But
right.
still very individualistic.
I mean, so much so that he's influenced so many folks. You know, I look at the Marsalis brothers, Winton and Branford, as my big brothers,
Hmm.
and I used to have. I mean, we're still cool. I just haven't seen him in a while. Branford used to be very close, speaking to each other. It's a big brother figure. Man, Wayne did a number on him. Wayne really kind of helped him get to who he is. Wayne and Sonny Rollins. Wayne, um, if you're open to it and you're not just hell bent on the rules look like square peg and you know you're not just in the box all the time.
Right.
Wayne can really open you up to a lot of different musical possibilities. I just find it to me sometimes a shame that people think that because the music is charted that they should play it. I think you should experience it, try to play it, but not everybody as an improviser is really ready for that level of intensity and information. Um, I grew up with guys who were trying to play like Pinocchio, and stuff like that, and the sorcerer. I'm like, why are we playing these songs?
Yeah.
We don't have enough information to even deal with this material.
Yeah.
You know, it's so deep. You know, we need some age on us and some other experiences in life.
Good point.
And
Yeah.
then you also need to be open in such a way that you don't come with judgment. You know, you have to be musically like an open vessel,
Sure.
you know, to play Wayne's music. If you just deal with it from a technical perspective, much like Train playing A Love Supreme,
Hmm.
or later on, like the Olatunji concert, or live, like was it live in Philadelphia, or before he passed, all, you just gotta accept it as a thing, you know, because it's just too heavy. It's just too deep.
Yeah.
I mean, at least for me personally, at least for me, I'm a deeply emotional person when it comes down to those kinds of sounds, especially if I go and approach it openly.
Hmm.
I've been known to just cry because it's like, I can't believe these guys were doing this at this time in history when all these other things were going on in the world, and this thing came out of that.
Yeah. I mean, crazy. First of all, I mean, the year that this album, I mean, what a crazy, just a crazy time in America, you know?
Right.
Um, you know, politically, socially, and then musically. I mean, the Beatles arrived in 1964. It's
Right.
just so much. I mean, Train's doing these remarkable things,
Right.
and you know, everything. It's cool. All right, man. Anything else you want to promote, or anything else you'd like to say about Wayne Shorter?
Love Wayne. Love, you know, keep supporting him. I mean, you know, we're all very affected by him not being here, and I work with Buster Williams, and I could tell he was extremely affected because, you know, they played together and know each other, and Buster and Herbie and Wayne are all Buddhist. You know, so is Steve Teray and
Mm.
Stanley Cowell. They were all Buddhists. They chanted Namyo Renge Kyo, and they all have a connection to each other because of their faith and what they believe. I could just see it. It's a little heavy for guys like that. You know, it's not just on the musical side through their faith, and you know, I just wish everybody the best who's dealing with it that way, because he's a force that's just gone off.
All right, there you have it. That is my conversation with Bruce Williams regarding Wayne Shorter. And remember to check out the full interview with Bruce regarding his life and his career as well, which is available through this podcast series. To learn more about Bruce Williams, go to brucewilliamssaxophone.com. All right, cats, time to get into this music. Let's do it. Let's drop the needle on side number one. Track number one is the title track, Night Dreamer. And after a somewhat trippy piano intro, the ensemble presents the melodic line as a jazz waltz in the style of Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers, the group in which Wayne Shorter gained his reputation. The solos are presented first by featuring Wayne Shorter, and then Lee Morgan and McCoy Tyner. I mean, man, what a lineup. Then Shorter jumps back in around 4 minutes and 45 seconds with an even more impassioned solo than his first, before returning to the written line. After which, Shorter is off and running again with a third and final solo before a studio fade. Special attention should be paid to the incredible connection between Elvin Jones, Reggie Workman, and McCoy Tyner. Night Dreamer is an incredible opening track, and I believe you can really hear the influence of John Coltrane on Shorter's playing on this track and throughout the record. Check it out, Night Dreamer. Track number two is Oriental Folk Song, which is an adaptation of an old Chinese tune. The piece begins with a rubato, that means like out of time, introduction that is very Coltrane-esque. The main written line is presented featuring long tones played against a light swing feel. The dynamics pick up slightly as Wayne Shorter begins his improvisation, and then Lee Morgan takes over. McCoy Tyner takes the third solo and presents a solid opening theme that he continues to develop throughout his improvisation. The band then provides a written interlude, beginning a call and response between Elvin Jones and the ensemble before returning to the main written line. And as expected, the soloists are brilliant, and Jones and Workman's hookup adds the perfect palette for Shorter, Morgan, and Tyner to explore. Let me ask you, what's your astrological sign? I'm a Taurus, and Wayne Shorter was a Virgo, and that is the name of track number 3, Virgo. Virgo men are known to be rational thinking and excellent at problem solving while still being adventurous. They are also calculative, but still passionate with solid intuitive skills. This is a perfect description of Wayne Shorter. Virgo begins abruptly as Shorter presents the ballad against the rhythm section. As with many of his works, the song offers a melodic and harmonic level of sophistication that exemplifies his music. After Shorter's solo, Tyner shines, as he often does on ballads. Shorter then re-enters to begin his final descent. Lee Morgan is absent from this track. Special praise should again be given to Elvin Jones, who plays brushes, and Reggie Workman for their accompaniment. Jones, in particular, was known to play with great fire and energy, but really not enough is made about his ability to play with great sensitivity. All right, my friends, it's time to drop the needle on side number 2. We flip the record, and let's take a journey down the Black Nile. Black Nile is a song that is meant to depict the journey of the Nile River. It's one of the most recognizable pieces from the album, and as with all the tracks thus far, Shorter is the first to navigate an improvisation, which he does with great skill and passion. Lee Morgan then takes over, and McCoy Tyner jumps in with his solo statement as the journey continues. Elvin Jones then adds some severe turbulence with his fiery improvisation at around 5 minutes into the piece. The group then steadies the ship and returns to present the main melody. Black Nile is a highlight on this record. Thematically, the idea of following a river journey had been done before, most notably by Czech composer Bedřich Smetana, who did so brilliantly on his incredible work, The Moldau, one of my personal favorite concert works. So let's take a trip. Bring your life vest, bring your paddle, and let's go down the Black Nile. Track number 2 of side number 2 is Charcoal Blues, which is Wayne Shorter's specialized take on the traditional and straightforward 12-bar blues format. Although there is nothing ever traditional or straightforward about Wayne Shorter's music. The track begins with McCoy Tyner, and then Shorter presents the somewhat quirky melody. After Shorter's lengthy solo, Tyner takes center stage again with his improvisation. Hearing Shorter and Tyner play the blues using their signature styles is fascinating. Once again, Lee Morgan is absent from this track. Charcoal Blues. The final track on the original LP is Armageddon, which was considered by Shorter to be a showpiece for the album. In an interview with Nat Hentoff, Shorter talks about the track, saying the following: "What I'm trying to express here is a sense of judgment approaching. Judgment for everything alive, from the smallest ant to man. I know that the accepted meaning of Armageddon is the last battle between good and evil, whatever it is. But my definition of that judgment to come is a period of total enlightenment in which we discover what we are and why we're here." Wayne Shorter was certainly a deep thinker. The song's written sections offer a somewhat irregular form than most average jazz standards. The soloists, Wayne Shorter, Lee Morgan, and McCoy Tyner, handled the uniqueness of the chord changes with great confidence and skills. Enjoy. All right, we did it. We made it to the end of the record. Certainly better for it. Let's lift the needle, put the record safely back into its jacket, and back on a shelf for another day. And in conclusion, Night Dreamer is the first of the classic Wayne Shorter solo albums from this period, many of which were recorded around this time. The album's success comes from the uniqueness of Shorter's writings and talents, and also the skills of Lee Morgan, McCoy Tyner, Elvin Jones, and Reggie Workman. All right, as always, I want to thank you for checking out the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. And a special thank you to Bruce Williams for joining us. Now, I interviewed Bruce first about his life and his career, and then we talked about Wayne Shorter. So I split that interview into two, and also uploaded on the site will be my discussion with Bruce Williams. He's very open and very honest about his life, and I think you will really enjoy that. So check it out. But you can also go to his website to learn more about what he's up to. To learn more about the podcast, go to 30albums or 30years.com. Anyway, together, let's keep this music alive and have a wonderful day.